Okay. Well, I think we'll get going here. If others trickle in, then it'll just be during the intro stuff. So let's get started. So let me make sure I can share my screen okay. All right. So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today on this visualization workshop. My name is Jess Mayott. A few notes about Hopin. I just learned it yesterday, so just a few things that I can share with you. If you can double click on my slides to maximize them or bring them in the same with my video feed, anything that you're seeing on the screen you can double click on to make bigger. Feel free to ask questions either in the chat feed on the right or in the Q&A on the right throughout the presentation. We'll get to them as we can. Please let me know if there seems to be any technical issues. I'm new to this, so hopefully it goes smoothly. Otherwise, we'll fix what we can. And there'll be opportunities during the workshop where I'll invite you, if you like, to come share your screen and audio so that you can speak to the group or share what we're working on. So there's a way to do that. We'll get to when we cross that bridge. So let us get started here. All right, so I just want to give a little roadmap to today's workshop just to get you oriented. We'll start with an introduction to data viz, and then we will explore data viz through a warm-up exercise, and then we'll look at some existing examples of how museums are using data viz. Next, we'll apply what we're learning to drafting some of our own ideas for what a dashboard could look like for your work. And then we'll go ahead and end with ways you can keep growing these skills beyond the workshop. Before jumping right in, I wanted to make sure to define what this workshop is and what this workshop isn't. Hopefully by 10:30 today, or wherever your time zone is, you'll be able to identify some of the basic components of data viz and dashboards, that you'll have brainstormed a concept of your own, that you'll have resources like tools and examples to follow that can guide you after the workshop, and then you'll feel more confident and familiar with how data viz could help you in your work and your museum. And just what this workshop is not. It's not going to be a step-by-step guide about how to use Excel or Tableau or any of the other softwares. This is really just a conceptual workshop to get your feet wet. It's not a complete course in data viz at all, or in graphic design, or in data communication. We only have 90 minutes here. So it's also not going to give you a ready-to-use dashboard. We're just going to start drafting and getting the juices flowing here. And then there's not going to be like any kind of secrets or trade secrets, or that my method that I'm going to go through today is the best one. It's just what worked for me, and hopefully can get you started. Like I mentioned, you are going to need some tools today. So if you have some blank paper handy, and then at least one writing utensil, ideally more than one if you have different colors, because we're going to be sketching out some ideas. So feel free to get those together as we're getting started here. So just first a little bit about me. My background is in environmental science and field biology, and now I'm applying that to natural history collections work. I was drawn to museums because of their interdisciplinary nature. So there's science and storytelling and art and stewardship all together in one. And so after I graduated from the University of Vermont, I went and interned at the Milwaukee Public Museum in the zoology collections department, and really fell in love with managing collections. And so then I went on to pursue my master's in museum studies at the University of Colorado-Boulder at the CU Museum of Natural History, where I was able to work with collections further, but also get involved in other parts of the museum, like in education programs and exhibit design. And that interdisciplinary spirit of museums is what I really love so much. And that's kind of what led me to considering how to bring a different discipline like data viz into museums. I first explored data viz in museums when I was doing my graduate thesis work, coming up with a thesis idea. I worked with data every day in the collections, and I was learning in class how central data are to how museums operate, how they advocate for themselves, how they share their collection with the public and with researchers. And I came across data viz and I wanted to make it more accessible for museum folks, because at the time it really felt like something only computer programmers or marketing professionals were good at and could do. So I started taking classes online and on campus. And for my thesis, I designed 5 different dashboards that are made for museums, dashboards being a type of data viz tool that we'll go over today. I used feedback from the staff at the museum to make them more useful and more easy to use. And then I wrote up tutorials about how to use them and collected all the resources I could and put all of that on a website called ColVis, which is short for Collection Visualization. The link to that is in the description of the event. I'll also put it in the chat at the end if you're interested in checking it out. So enough about me. First, let's just dive right into some definitions. I'm assuming everybody here knows what a museum is, so we'll skip that. But data visualization at its foundation is the visual representation of information and data. In other words, it's how we go from a data set to a pretty picture. The data on the left is from a make-believe fruit stand, which we're going to use a lot today as an example, where there's fruit categories and then the number of each fruit that we have in stock. And that can be visually represented by this pie chart, where the color is the category and the size of the slice is the count of the fruit that we have. If you've ever made a pie chart or understand what it's telling you, then congratulations, you already know what data viz is. Like pie charts, dashboards are another form, another tool of data viz. Specifically, a dashboard is a tool that provides a means of monitoring, measuring, analyzing, and extracting relevant insights while displaying information in an interactive, intuitive, and visual way. So just think of the dashboard of your car. You see meters and symbols and dials, units and colors, and they're all showing you data about your car. It's a set of little charts all working together to help you understand in an intuitive and clear way what is going on with your car at a certain time. And so here's an example of a dashboard that I made. A dashboard in data viz terms typically has multiple charts that are working together, and there are legends and filters also in the dashboard. They're all arranged together in one display, and they help you extract insights or make insights about what the data is telling you. In this case, making insights about the participation in museum programs over time. So let's go back to the nuts and bolts. We have there's fundamentals about data viz. There's 3 kind of main fundamentals of it. The first is what are sometimes called visual channels. These are characteristics of shapes that we can use to encode data into. These are ways that the brain instantaneously processes information visually without much higher thinking. So for example, color is a super easy one. You can use color to distinguish different categories, or you could use it to show like a continuous value. Like if you're looking at the weather report and you see a storm on the radar, you've got those different colors to show you how heavy the rain is at that particular place. There's also, besides color, there's position, which is pretty common. This would be like a point on a timeline showing you where that data is placed, or an XY coordinate on a scatter plot where both the vertical and horizontal position means something. The next would be something like size. This would be like your bar chart, where the length of the bar indicates a certain value, or the size of the angle of a pie chart slice indicates a certain value. And those are just a few examples. There's tons of different visual channels and descriptors like that. But let's just take one as an example. Let's see how color can make a difference in how easily we can analyze data visually. So in a second, I'm going to show you a data set, and I want you to tell me how many number 3s there are in the data. Okay, how many 3s were there? Now I'll give you a second chance. This time we'll see how color can help us. What about now? So does it almost feel like you're not even counting how many 3s there are? You're not seeing like 1, 2, 3. You're just seeing that there are 3. That's kind of what color can do, what these visual channels can do, is let us in an instant be able to tell a pattern in the data. So next we have chart types. Nowadays there's a lot of fancy chart types out there, but 95% of the time you really are just better off using one of the classics, you know, a scatter plot, a map, a bar chart, a timeline. And there's 2 questions you can kind of use to guide which would be most appropriate for what you're trying to do. The first is, what type of data do you have? Are they categories? Are they measurable quantities? Is it you know, time? Are they ranks? And then the second question would be, what are you trying to do with the data? Are you comparing 2 things? Are you seeing change over time? Are you seeing proportions of a whole piece? That can really help you decide whether you're doing a pie chart or a scatter plot. And there's a lot of guides online, actually, that'll help you narrow down your choices. But let's just do one example as to why choosing a chart is really can make a difference one way or the other. So we'll go back to our fruit stand, where we have categories of fruits, and then we have counts of the fruit that are measurable quantities. So we have categories and measurable quantities. So let's say we want to check if we have more apples or oranges today. Now, just looking at this pie chart, how easy is it to tell if we have more apples or oranges? Probably more apples, but you got to kind of look at it sideways, think about it. Now let's change this from a pie chart to a bar chart. Kind of easier to tell, right? Our brains are a bit better at telling small differences in length versus small differences in angles. So it's the same data, but a different chart type can really be more appropriate depending on what questions you're trying to look into for your data. And that's kind of why it's handy to try to try out some different things and see what makes the most sense. So the last piece of data viz, what I consider, in my opinion, like one of the most powerful things about it is that it can be interactive. One of the most interesting things is that you can have one chart that you can then manipulate if you have different questions you want to ask, or things you're trying to discover about the data. Instead of having a set of 50 pie charts, you can have one that you can then change and go back and manipulate. And so the main things about interactivity is you can take actions that then have a reaction. So actions would be like clicking on something, or hovering your cursor over something, or putting text into a text box, or clicking and dragging something. And then that can have a whole bunch of different ways that you can manipulate the data viz or the dashboard you're working with. One being sorting, so you're putting things in a particular order, like the bars as their value. Or you could be filtering, where you're actually only showing data that fit into a certain criteria. For that example in the middle there, like only show the blue stuff. It'll actually remove things that aren't part of that criteria. And then the other example is highlighting, where you know, one particular data point or you know, characteristic of the data gets kind of popped out, usually using color, and then the rest is kind of faded into the background. So it's all still there, but you're kind of bringing something to attention. And with dashboards, sometimes you have these interactable controls like in a box on the side. Otherwise, you can also parts of the actual charts are interactive. So you can actually click on a bar in a bar chart and it does something, versus having to use a control on the side. Some dashboards use both. So you just have a lot of options with how you can create that powerful feature to what you're trying to create. So for interactivity, let's look at an example here. We're back at our fruit stand, and we have a scatter plot here of the average fruit size in grams for every year that we've been in business. And while having all the types of fruit on this scatter plot is insightful, and that now we know for sure that watermelons are big, what if we want to, again, compare apples and oranges? So this filter underneath the chart that I've got here will let you select or deselect which fruits are in the scatter plot. So if we just take out watermelons, then we're allowed to see more of the nuance of what we're actually interested in. And we could even remove everything except apples and oranges if we really were just focusing on that, and then easily back out again to see the whole data set. Okay, so now that we've talked the talk about data viz, let's do a quick warm-up exercise. So again, you're going to need a blank piece of paper and at least one writing utensil. In a moment, I'm going to put up a very simple data set onto the screen. And I'm going to give you 5 minutes to just come up with as many different ways you can think of to visualize that data set. It can be as simple or as creative as you want. No wrong answers. Just think of as many different ones as you can and sketch them out. All right, so here comes your data set. 7-11, that's it. So I've got a timer ready to go. So 5 minutes starting now. So you can think back to what we've already looked at today or to what you've seen elsewhere. Thinking about the different visual channels that we've talked about today, like color and position, size and length. It doesn't have to be complicated. Just try to think of as many unique ways as you can. And again, having those multiple writing utensils helps. So I'll just give you a few minutes to work on that, and then we'll come back together. See if we have any questions yet. Yeah, and feel free to put questions in the chat or in the Q&A section during this. If you want me to put up a previous slide for reference, I'm happy to do that. Keep at it. I'm sure you got a few more ideas. Keep it up. You got 2 minutes left. See if you can squeeze out just a couple more ideas. All right, just a minute left. All right, 20 seconds. All right, time is up. So, does anyone, do you have any brave volunteers who want to share their audio and screen to like hold up what they're doing or anything? Share either in the chat. It doesn't have to be audio or video, anything. Any kind of insights you had, breakthroughs, challenges, um, anything that you thought was pretty cool that you came up with. Again, it can just be in the chat. You don't have to step up. There is a way to request. There should be a button to request sharing your audio and video, which we can just do momentarily for the group. Give you a couple seconds if you want to put anything in the chat. Even just like a list of, I did a scatter plot and a pie chart and or used certain or anything like that. No takers? Oh, okay. Tick marks like tallies. Nice. I'd be interested in seeing that map. Okay. Triangles. Yep, keep them coming. Even if it's simple stuff. Okay. Well, so we've got some good shared ideas here. What we'll do now is experimenting is good, Laura. You should experiment. It's just a piece of paper. Like, this is a good way to just get ideas down. So just try things out. So now that we've shared some ideas, we'll just take 2 minutes to just return to our sheets and try to see if there's anything else that, seeing what other folks worked on, we could try. So I'll just start a timer again for 2 minutes and we'll just see if anything else comes up. All right, 2 minutes starting now. One question I will ask you that might spur some ideas is think of what the units might be. Is this pounds? Is it dollars? Is it temperature? Is it coordinates? We did have someone do a map. Is it miles? Is it number of apples? So like think of how the units might change how you visualize two numbers. see if that sparks anything, because that's something that you can consider as well. All right, just another minute. All right, 10 seconds. Okay, time is up. Now, does anyone have anything that they wanted to share from that? If the units question helped, or if you had any ideas that came up that time, feel free to put them in the chat, or if you're feeling brave, request sharing with the group. Okay, units helped. Okay, great. I'd love to see what people thought of if the units helped them. Okay, thermometer for temperature and dials, kind of thinking back to the dashboard, you know, your miles per hour dials. Okay, a map with miles and number of states. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, what ultimately the data that we have is representing something in real life, and so to kind of think back to what that is originally showing can give us some inspiration for how to show that visually, how to make that kind of into a tangible thing again. So when you were measuring something into 7 and 11, to kind of think back to what you were measuring before, can kind of spur some creativity with how to visually represent it. So anybody else have anything to share? Go ahead and put it in chat. Otherwise, we'll move on to our next section here. Hours in the day. Sure. Okay. Well, I think we'll move on to our next one. But yeah, feel free to try this out any other time or with data that might be something that you're working with. I will share with you a link because this is an exercise that actually a lot of quite a few data viz workshops or trainings include, where it's just a simple 2-number data set and how many ways you can think of it. So here is a list. I'll put a link in the chat for all the wacky ways people have come up with for doing 2 different numbers. It's not 7 and 11, but same idea. If you're interested, you can check that out. And this exercise is something I really like because it shows some really, I'll put the link in the, there we go, it's on the screen too. This exercise is something I really like because it shows a few really interesting points about data viz. You know, as tech-centric as data viz seems, like you have to use a computer all the time, it's actually super valuable to just start on pen and paper. That's where a lot of the magic happens. It's a good way to kind of start with a lot of ideas and then narrow down from there instead of getting this tunnel vision from the beginning about a certain idea that you want. And then lastly, it kind of shows you already have some intuition for this. There's a lot of rules and best practices out there to learn, but ultimately that human element is really central to this. and it's something that you've already got. So hopefully that made you feel a little bit better. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take what we've learned so far and actually examine some dashboards that museums have made and are using. This is helpful in two ways. First, it's good to see some concrete ways that DataViz is helping museums and how they've made them in what contexts. And secondly, it's also a good skill to be able to look at an example of DataViz or a dashboard and be able to look at it closely to understand what you like about it, what you don't like about it, and take from it when you're trying to make something of your own. So we're going to look at 4 different dashboards, and we're going to look at these 5 different questions for them. What data is being represented? How is it being represented? So thinking of chart types and the visual channels. How is it interactive? What is the purpose or the audience? And then simply, what do you like and what do you not like? Very scientific. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, for each of these dashboards, I'm going to show it on my screen here in Hopin, but I will also send a link or post the link in the chat. You're welcome to just go directly to it as we're going through it, so you can play along with us. Otherwise, you're welcome to then go back to it at a later time and really explore all of them that are at each link. So we'll start with the first here. All right, first we're going to go to the Met. How about that? All right, let me just get the link so I can put it in the chat, and then we will share the screen. All right, the link is in the chat, and we will bring it up. Okay. Oh, okay, just want to make sure that. So we are at a dashboard or a set of dashboards that the Met has made. It's available on their website. It's for their Thomas J. Watson Research Library. There's 5 different dashboards here. You can scroll through them using the arrows at the bottom. There's, again, 5 of them. Let's just go all the way to the 5th. Just for today's exercise, you can look at the rest at another time. I encourage you to. They're pretty neat. So first, our question is, what is the data we're looking at? So we've got, this is a dashboard showing the new acquisitions to the collection there at the library. So we have, along the y-axis of the line chart, we've got the number of acquisitions, we've got the date of the acquisition along the bottom, we've got fiscal year, we've got the 2 categories of whether it was a gift or a title purchased. So those are the types of data we've got in here. And then how are they represented? We've got a line chart, as you can see. We've got the color being the 2 categories. And we have a line chart is using position and also slope to represent data. And we also have whether the line is a solid line or a dashed line, for whether it's the average over time or the exact data point over time. And then this table on the right side, we've got, it's kind of like a table with bar chart in it. So the length of the bar chart is showing the value, the text is showing you the value. And so that's what we have and how it's represented. And then for interactivity, there's, when you hover over points, you'll get this hover box. This is called a hover box that pops up. And it'll show you the precise data values. If you click on it, it'll fade the rest away. This is the highlight feature we talked about, or the highlight interactivity, where you click and it brings that forward while the rest fades back. And it actually filters the table, so now you're only looking at the data from that point. And we can sort the timeline of this in the table from most recent or from most in the past, as we kind of flip back and forth. So who is this intended for? Why is this here? There's actually some text that the Met has put in underneath these to kind of explain what you're looking at, where this data came from, and also some instructions about how to use it, like try doing this, try doing that, which I really like having that context there. It's really handy for folks. But it looks like this is really just meant for the public, for visitors, for stakeholders, to, just the transparency of how the museum is operating and growing their collection or not. And so again, what I like or not like, personally, I like that there's instructions underneath and context. My one thing too, for what I don't like is that the color for titles and gifts doesn't show up in the table. They're both the same for the bars. It would be kind of nice that the title bars were, the titles purchase bars were blue and that these are red, but just to kind of give it some more unity. But there's always going to be something that you want to, you'd want to like see what it would look like different or change. So it's important to be noticing those things as well as what you like. Oh yeah, and the other interactivity, of course, being these filters over here. So you can check or uncheck these boxes to filter down the whole dashboard to only show that data. Okay, so that's the Met. Next, we're going to do the Smithsonian. So let me again quickly, where do we go here? Yes, I'm going to put the Smithsonian's link in the chat here. And then we'll switch over to that one. There we go. All right, and that worked, yes. All right, so the Smithsonian also has multiple dashboards available online. We're just gonna go look at one today, but again, I encourage you to go check out the rest. Let's start with the Virtual Smithsonian, just for now. Their dashboard is kind of more of a set of like a broken up style as opposed to. So what we're looking at with this one, data, we've got number of images, we've got the time. This is all, this one is about the use of the museum's data and collection online. So virtual engagement, virtual visits. So number of images looked at and when. And then we have down here, unique visitor count and fiscal year. And then at the farthest one down, we've got types of social media engagement. So YouTube views, likes and follows. And then we have the different categories being the different social media platforms. And these are line graphs. So let's do how they're represented. So we've got a line chart here where the position and slope indicates values, and then that's pretty much it for that. It's just really the position in line. And then here we've got a bar chart. So again, length, size being the way to encode the data. And then here we've got category being color, and it being a line chart again, the position and slope indicating data values. For interactivity, this one at the bottom, you can hover over to highlight certain points along the line. If you click, it'll just leave a dot at that spot. Hover, you get the hover box with the data as well. And then with the bar chart, we've got hover boxes, and we have two filters now up here. So we can select which Smithsonian institution, you're in space, for example, and also whether you're looking at annual or fiscal year, you can change between. And then up here, we have a similar situation with two drop-down filters. And we also have a slider up here to filter down what time period we're looking at. So you can adjust both ends of it, and it'll zoom in for the rest of the line chart. So things that I personally like. So I like at the bottom how they chose the colors to match the brand of the social media platform. It's just kind of a nice unifying design choice, especially like if you picture it being shuffled, it would be kind of hard to look at, like the red line being Facebook or something like that. And the fact that there's multiple filters on these is nice, where you can really layer on specific criteria. I do wish that they would work together. Like if you interact with one, it'll show something in another, kind of like the Met dashboard did. Yeah, so that was the Smithsonian one. And next we have, let's see, we're going to do the Cleveland Museum of Art. And again, I really encourage you to go back and really explore these. Okay, so here is Cleveland Art Museum. All right, and then we'll switch over. There we go. So this one's kind of like the Met was, where there's a lot going on, but it's neat to see the different ways that people are showing data and choosing to have people interact with it. So with this one, again, this has multiple dashboards, but you can use the tabs at the top to cycle through them. But let's just work on comparison by department for today. So what type of data are we looking at? So this is similar to the Smithsonian, like virtual visitor interaction with the collection online. So we have time again along the x-axis. We have the different categories of ways people are interacting with the collection, whether it's on Wikipedia or on their online collection. We have the different departments of the art museum in these different rows and by the filters. And how they're represented, we've got the colors for the different, at least on the top here, we have color being different type of interaction. And then in these lower charts, we've got color being the department, which I think is kind of nice because you can see what color, let's say, Chinese art is, and then look at across to see how that yellow has tracked across them. Let's see, what else do we have? So for interaction, we have this checklist filter on the right. So you can just look at, oops, gotta refresh that. We can just look at specific departments of interest. Like if we're just interested in Korean and Japanese, we can filter down to those. The whole dashboard filters to that. And if we click on one of these bars in here, like if we were just interested in medieval art, it highlights that down here. And then it actually filters because it removes data from that top bar chart. And so who is this for and why? It's probably to let the public or stakeholders know how their collection is being utilized virtually. So same thing with the Smithsonian, to show online presence, especially important with the pandemic over the past year, to show how folks are interacting with it and using it and that it's making an impact. Things that I like or don't like, I like how the charts interact with each other, and that you have a very simple way to filter things down. I wish you could zoom in with this top chart because the bars are so narrow, you can't really get a lot of detail. You just kind of get the global view. But otherwise, I think it's a pretty snazzy one. So, okay, so we've got one left. Let's see here. Next, we're gonna go to, it's our last one. Where are we? There we go. Here's the link for the last one. We're gonna go to GBIF, if anyone's familiar. So this one is a little bit of a exception. It's not technically a museum, but GBIF, which is the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, is kind of like one of the standard online databases that natural history museums and biological museums upload their collection data into. So it's kind of like a cumulative online database. And they have created some neat data viz and dashboard features for you to use to explore and present data with. So we're just going to take a quick look at some of the ones they have because they're pretty neat. I just using the university or the CU Museum of Natural History herbarium data set, just to use as an example today. So this first page mostly has this map, which shows data locations by their coordinates or location on here with these little honeycombs, and the density of those specimens, where they came from, is like the deeper red, the more it came from that area. So you kind of have location and density of specimen location put in here. And this few interactions you can do here, you can zoom in, you can pan around if you're interested in a certain area. Hovering doesn't do anything, clicking doesn't do anything, but you can actually, if you go down to the bottom right and click this little paint roller, you can like change how it looks, which I think was kind of cool. You can really like customize or play around with the different color scheme or base map. So you can kind of actually do some data viz design within this platform, which is kind of fun. And so besides the map, if you scroll to the top and click metrics, you'll see more of like a kind of a traditional dashboard situation where you've got some charts about the specimens in the data set. So we have this, what is it called, a Starburst chart? It's kind of like a multi-layered pie chart where you have, it can show like a hierarchy. So this is the taxonomic levels of these species in the data set. And we've got a line chart for just when specimens were collected over time and how many. And then we've got this bar chart table, which actually is showing you like issues with your data set. So that would be something that shows that this isn't just for folks exploring the collection, it's for those who are taking care of the collection or managing the data. They can actually use this to see what might be they might need to do with their data set. So for interactions, there's hover boxes on. You can click to filter down to certain levels of interest. With this, you can click and drag along the timeline to zoom into a certain time period, which I think is pretty neat. So you can really, if you're really just interested in a certain number of decades, you can zoom in that way. And the other neat thing, kind of like the map, you can change these, you can actually change which chart type it's showing. So like up here, you can choose your Starburst, or you can choose a tree map, which is something similar. Oh geez, that's maybe not the best for this data set, so we'll go back to that one. But if you want to change this, for example, to a pie chart, you just can toggle through them, or a vertical chart. So having that kind of power is nice because you can actually do some customization within the dashboard itself. Okay, so that was our Safari. Just a few examples there, and there's plenty more out there if you just poke around, or even ask within your own organization if anyone else is working on something similar. There might be in other departments if you're looking for other examples. So let me just copy this other link here. Okay. All right, so now we're going to switch over to all right, so here's our main exercise for today. I just want to give a quick break in case there's any questions for me right now. I mean, I haven't seen any new ones in the Q&A or chat, but before we switch gears, if there's anything, any questions, or make sure that everything is still going technically good. Okay. So for our next section of or the last section of the workshop, we're going to be doing a brainstorm exercise. This is the chance to possibly come up with a very simple and basic like dashboard for your work. So this will help guide you through thinking the thought process of, you know, what am I working on? What data is involved? And how could a dashboard help? So this is where you'll need another blank sheet of paper and some writing utensils. I'm going to post a link to a worksheet that I have created. It's a PDF, so I know you can't print off right away. So I'll give you the link so that you can use that document as a guide right now or in the future. And then we'll just, I'm going to show you just how to quickly sketch out one of these worksheets for the moment. So I just put the link. It looks a little, it's kind of a weird URL, but I promise it's safe. So you can take a look at that. Otherwise, we'll go through it all in the presentation today, in the workshop today. So for right now, you'll need a blank piece of paper and to put these dividing lines in. So a horizontal line through the middle, and then a horizontal line dividing that top section in half again, and then dividing that top section in half. So you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Those will be our steps. And just a moment, I'll let you start getting that ready. So I have an example of a filled out worksheet using our fruit stand example data set. And I want to put a poll in the chat to see how folks would like to proceed with this exercise. One option is that I go through the entire worksheet example from head to foot so that you see the whole process, and then I give you, the time to work at your own pace through the whole thing. Or we can take it all as a group, one step at a time, where we work on step 1, I show you the example, and then give you some time, and then we all move on to step 2 after a few minutes. So I'm just going to create the poll, just a moment, just to see how folks are feeling about which way they might want to go through this. Okay, so I've just put the poll up on the right-hand side. See a chat, polls, people Q&A, just go to polls. And again, that first option is I go through the entire example first of the entire worksheet example, and then give you the free time to go at your own pace to do it yourself. Or we kind of go one step at a time with the example and then giving you a chance to work on that step before moving on. So if you could just head over to polls and then choose which one you think might be best or most appealing for you. And then we'll just do a simple majority. Anyone have a preference? Okay, I'm starting to see results here. People seem to want to go one step at a time, which is totally fine. So in that case, we'll do step 1. I'll show you the step 1 from the example, and I'll give you a few minutes, and then we'll move on to the next. And at the end, we'll just have some extra time if anyone needs to go back to any of them, okay? All right, yeah, it seems like that's the way we'll go, which is totally fine with me. So again, the worksheet also in the link also includes the example at the end, so you can go back and refer to that whenever you're working on it. Okay, so thank you very much for participating. So step 1, if you've got your sheet ready, has to do with just identifying what your project is, what your goal is, what your question is. So think of a specific project or task or question you've got in your work right now. Is it something like writing a grant proposal or planning a project, digitizing, assessing an educational program, proposing a budget, anything like that? It could be something that you are always, it's a day-to-day kind of project or ongoing project, or something very, one time. Ideally something that is not hypothetical, that's happening right now. And just write out a quick description, thinking of your goals, your outcomes, what is that question you have? So the fruit stand example I've got is we're interested in learning which country or countries are the best sources for the fruits that are sold in the fruit stand. That's kind of, we have a research question that we're trying to find an answer for. So I will give you just a couple minutes here to think of that, brainstorm it, and try to add some detail to box number 1 about your goal or your project or your question. And again, during this whole exercise, feel free to post in the Q&A if there's any questions, or into the chat. And again, we'll spend a few minutes on each question or on each step here, and then at the end, there'll just be free time for you to return to any of them. So don't feel like you have to have, I mean, they are in order for a reason, but don't feel like you're falling behind or anything. All right, just about 30 seconds, and then we'll move on. Almost there. Okay, so hopefully you have some idea of what you might be trying to answer, or make a tool to help with this step. Go through. So moving on to step 2. Step 2 is thinking about your audience. So who is your audience for this dashboard? Who are you going to be presenting it to, or sharing it with, or allowing to use it, making it available to? What do they care about? What are their needs? What are their interests? How might a dashboard help them, or help them accomplish? So for our example with the fruit stand, I'm going to make this dashboard for the fruit stand CEO, and they're mainly interested in the fruit quality and consistency over time, and they want to explore and compare different combinations of data easily and quickly. They want to see different fruits coming from different countries over time. That's kind of, they want it to be easy, they want it to be quick, and they're interested in that consistency and quality over time. So I will give you another 2 minutes. And just, write a full, like a little bulleted list or a sentence or 2. Doesn't have to be complex, just to start thinking about the purpose, and the audience is important to consider before you really start coming up with any ideas. Would this be something you post on a website for anyone to find, or would this be presented to the board of your museum, or included in a grant proposal? Is it for researchers who don't need to know the common names of things? Or does it really need to be accessible to a certain age group? Just all things to help you identify your audience here. Just under a minute left, and we'll move on to our next step. Just about 20 seconds. Okay. So hopefully you've got at least some simple idea of who this might be for and what matters to them and how this tool is actually going to be useful for them and not just for the sake of making a dashboard to make a dashboard. So, okay. So our next step has to do with the data. So step 3, box 3 is going to have basically what you want to ask yourself, what data are most important to your project? So just write out a bulleted list of some of the data or data fields that would be important to include in a goal. Think of the things that you're going to be measuring or tracking. What are you counting or categorizing? Things you're trying to bring attention to. If you already have a data set for this task or objective that you're working on, think of the column headers in that data set. For example, with the fruit stand, I obviously want to look at country because we're trying to identify what country or countries are the best source. We can use average fruit weight as our quality measure. So we're going to be measuring that. How much of the stock is a certain fruit, like from our pie chart, the year, the fruit category, and let's say color and flavor are ways that maybe quality are important. So we're just kind of getting it all down and then we're going to narrow it down from there. So I'll give you another minute or so to do that. Keep it simple. About 30 seconds or so. This has multi-parts, so we'll move along a little faster here. About 10 seconds. All right. So if we got a few data fields there, and then the next step is now it's time to identify which are the most important. So we kind of got them all down as what is relevant to our dashboard possibly, but now let's actually identify the few that are actually really essential. So try to keep it no more than 4 or 5 for this exercise. Mark which ones are the most important to include, and here I just put little stars next to them. And then also think about which ones ought to be grouped together, which ones make sense to compare against each other. And this will start kind of forming some data groupings going forward. So for the fruit example, I want to see the quality of fruit from the different countries over time. So I want to definitely have country and fruit weight and year compared against each other. And then I also, want to know how much of each fruit we have in stock. So I definitely want to have percent in stock and the fruit type compared against each other. And there can be multiple, like year can be used in multiple groupings. So like there's a lot of flexibility here. We're just trying to draw some connections because you know your data best about what makes sense to start grouping together. So I'll just give you another minute for that one. And yeah, like flavor and color decided aren't as important as measures for this, so they don't move on past that. So we're trying to really boil it down to what's the most essential. And again, it's okay that this is really simple. We're just doing an exercise here. So if you just have a couple or, very basic, like year and count, that's totally fine. Those are really powerful things to have. All right, another 20 seconds or so. All right. So hopefully we got some, essential data identified and starting to draw some connections between them. So our next step is going to be on the right hand of that box in number 3. If you got any room left, if not, just use the back of the page. You're going to rewrite your data list. So only include the ones that are marked as important, and group them into their groupings. So for the fruit stand, I definitely want to. I'm going to want to compare country, year, and the weight. And then I'm also going to want to compare fruit and the fruit category and the amount in stock. So I've got those kind of groups separated out. And then once you have that, next to those data fields, start to identify what kind of data that is. So a country can be a location or I guess a category. Year is time, weight is a measurable quantity. And so kind of start thinking of what those data types could be, and also think if anything has a unit. So for us with the fruit, the weight, the unit is grams. So to start identifying the information about the data before we move forward into making actual visualizations of it. And it's important to note, not everything's going to have a unit, not everything's going to have one data type. Like country can be location, it can also be, a category. So just keep in mind, you don't have to have a unit and category for every single one of your data fields. It's just to start really thinking about the nature of your data. So I'll just give you another minute for that. And it's going to look different for everybody. So okay, another 30 seconds, and then we'll move on to our next step. All right, 10 seconds. All right. All right, so hopefully you have like 1, 2, 3 data groups that make sense to you, and that you've started to examine, what type of data they are, what units they are, because now we're going to shift into trying to come up with some ways to visualize those groups. So step 4, which is the whole bottom part of your page, is where you can, kind of like what we did with 7-Eleven back at the beginning, just start coming up with different ways to visualize these data groups. So start sketching some of these ideas, like take a data group that you made in step 3 and think of the different ways you could visualize that data group together. And you can try out multiple different ways. We'll eventually narrow it down, but for example, starting simple, when I want to compare fruit category and percent of stock, I chose a pie chart, just like we looked at before, where fruit category is the color and the percent, the number in stock would be the angle size. And then for my other data group where I'm trying to compare country, year, and weight, I tried two different ways. One being a scatter plot, it doesn't have to be fancy, scatter plot where each point is a average fruit weight per year, where year is on the x-axis and weight is on the y-axis. And I've got two colors of dot being the two countries. So you can, see one country being orange and one country being black dots. And then I'll try a different way where I have kind of like timelines where each year is a dot along the timeline, and the size of the dot, the radius of the dot, is the weight. So you can kind of see things, one country and then another country lined up against each other over time, with the size being the weight instead. So just playing around with different visual channels and different chart types. So I'll give you a few minutes to work on this because it is kind of, a long. So again, if you want me to go back to a slide that has the visual channels and the chart types, just to give you something to look at and refer to, I'm happy to bring that back up. But I'm going to give you, let's do 4 minutes. Just because of the interest of time, I know we are approaching 10:30, 11:30 for me. I'm in Wisconsin, so yeah, let's just do 4 minutes for this, and then we'll move on to our last step. So again, just keep it simple: pie charts, scatter plots, and just think of different ways that you can visualize the data that you're interested in comparing. It's okay if it ends up being something not useful, because then you can rule it out. Like, this is just get ideas down, like with 7-Eleven. And if you need more space and hopefully you have extra paper, you spill out to the next page, that's totally fine. Just get ideas down, that's the goal. And if anyone has any questions at all, where they're getting stuck, or just feel free to put anything in the Q&A or in the chat. The Q&A can be anonymous, so if you're you've got a question that you don't want me to know who you are, that's totally fine. All good here. We're trying to learn together, so I know this can be a challenge as someone who kind of self-taught this process. It is a different way of thinking, so I recommend you keep it simple. It does not have to be anything inventive or new. It can really just be simple graphs. Okay, another 2 minutes. And like I've got on the example, you can, write out the data that you're using in that chart, and then write which visual channel or which way you want to encode it next to it. You can start with that, or you can just start sketching something and then kind of do that after. So with the pie chart, I kind of knew I wanted to do a pie chart, and I just made it. And then I realized that fruit is color, percent of stock is angle size. So you can kind of work either way. I just find it easy to kind of do both, at least, so that you can track what you were actually doing and realize what data is encoded how. And then it can kind of show you how changing just one of them between the two can make a difference. So whatever way seems best for how your brain works, for writing it out first or for drawing it first, totally up to you. All right, just a few more seconds here and then we'll have to move on. Okay. I know it's not a lot of time, but I do want to make sure we get through the end here. All right, so moving on to our last step is actually trying to come up with how are these things going to be arranged together on one dashboard. So on another blank page, if you got another one, otherwise the back page, play around with how your different charts can be arranged together. So of the ones that you brainstormed in the previous step, which ones are the keepers? And how do they make sense together? So for me, I just wanted to use the scatter plot that I had and the pie chart. Just two charts is fine. You don't have to have things be that complicated. And so think about how you want them arranged on the dashboard. Is one bigger than the other? You know, what's off to the side? Usually if there's just two, there's not a lot you have to think about, like just one and the other together. And then once you kind of have an idea for that, think about how they might be interactive. You know, for mine, I wanted to have a hover box pop up when you hover over a point in the scatter plot that just shows, you know, the year, the weight, and the country. And I wanted to do where if you click on a fruit slice in the pie, it'll filter down the scatter plot to just show the information about that fruit kind. So that'll kind of let the CEO of fruit stand look at each fruit individually, or you know, be able to see overall which country, Brazil or Argentina, have given us the biggest fruits. So it's gonna be really, really simple things. Just choose like one or two ways that it could be interactive. And then also think of what other features of the dashboard you want to include. Usually dashboards have like a title at the top and legends like the Brazil and Argentina filled dot or empty dot, and then the colors, what those mean, somewhere on there. You can put titles on your individual charts, like my fruit in stock title on my pie chart. And I also added a little instruction of like, click on, what did I say? Click on the fruit in the pie chart to filter the scatter plot, just to show that's how this works. So there's little elements like that that you can add to your dashboard along with your charts to kind of make it one cohesive tool. So just start playing around with what you want to include, how are they going to be put together so that you have one display with all of that. You can try a few different kinds or just kind of make one that suits you, and that can be enough for today for sure. So I'll just give you a couple, let's do 2 minutes just to come up with one idea of how your dashboard might look with the charts you came up with. And again, I'm happy to go back to the slide where it either has the visual channels or the chart types or the types of interactions, or even going back to one of the museum examples if you'd like. Or feel free to go back to the museum examples and the links in the chat if there was something you needed to go refer to that you liked from today's safari. It'll just be another about minute and a half. And again, yeah, just keep it simple. Most of the time, it's really easy to overcomplicate these things, whether it's the dashboard itself or the charts. It's just really the best to just keep it simple. It's often, you know, just creates a better, a more easy to use and clear dashboard to just, you know, only have a couple things there, a couple ways to interact. All right, just about 30 more seconds or so, and then we'll kind of come together and reflect if anyone has anything to share. Okay, hopefully that was enough time. I know we're kind of rushing this, but I hope that was enough time to at least come up with like one possible layout for a dashboard for you. Does anyone have anything that they want to share in the chat um, about this experience? Like what was really challenging about it? What was something you're proud of that you came up with, or even just a short description of your dashboard, like I have a scatter plot and a pie chart and a title. Like that's that's amazing for today. That's your first dashboard ever, possibly. So whatever way you want to contribute to the chat about what you came up with or anything is very welcome. I know we only have about 5 minutes left, so I'll just give a couple minutes here, and then I just want to do a quick send off so that you get your, um, resources for what to do next if you're still interested in pursuing this. So anything at all, even just a quick description of your dashboard would be fantastic. I'm glad to hear the worksheet was helpful. I wish we could have taken a little bit slower time with it. um, so I'm glad to hear that breaking it down into parts and pieces that were manageable helped. Anyone else have anything to share, even if it's just, what the pieces of your dashboard ended up like? Great, we got a dashboard about immigration over time and where people are coming from. Sounds perfect. We got different data types there and a story to tell. Okay, well, continue to, if people are typing, keep typing. I'm just gonna make sure I get my last slides in here before the end of our session. So, so I encourage you, even if it was a struggle today, like there's so many ways. I hope this is just the very beginning for you, that you're inspired to think that you really can do this, and that know that there's tons and tons and tons of free resources out there for how to learn more about data viz in general, through online courses or workshops and things, including this, that I encourage you to explore more dashboards, like go back to those links in the chat to play around with those dashboards yourself or see what the other ones were like. Ask those questions to yourself as you're going. And you can also learn how to use a lot of data viz software for free through online tutorials, and a lot of the software is free or has free versions. So even Excel, just play around in Excel for a little bit. There's a total list of resources that live on my website, that are just out there for you to browse and explore. At our more resources page on colvisdashboards.com. So if there's any interest and curiosity in continuing this journey for you, I'm here to support you. If you have any questions about what you want to work on or certain resources you're looking for, please reach out. You can reach me through the website, but I'll also just put my personal email in the chat. And hopefully you can identify the basics of what data viz is, and that congratulations, made your first dashboard, as simple as it could be, and that you've got those training resources and exploratory resources for going forward. And hopefully you just feel a little bit more familiar, a little bit more confident that this is something that you could learn and that it's something that could help you in your work and in your museum. I'll just stick around here if you had any other questions. Thank you so much for participating and coming with me today. And yeah, keep adding descriptions of your dashboards. I'm very excited to read them and share with the group. Otherwise, take care, enjoy the rest of CWAM, and yeah, I'll just hang out here until you're ready to head out. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions at all. Thank you so much. All right, what do we got? Okay, visitors, broken down where from. Okay, great. That you already have data collected kind of definitely gives you a good foundation for what data is important and what their data types are. Okay, of course, Navajo textile collection. So a collection dashboard, very cool. Looking at condition and significance. Great. Yes, I love these ideas. I really wish there was a way you could like post a picture. I'm so curious to know what these look like. Yeah, our time slot is ending right now, so feel free to head out if you've got your next session. Otherwise, I will just stay here for a little bit longer in case there's anything else to chat about or questions about anything. So, all right, we got one about teaching collections. Thank you everyone for participating. I really appreciate you coming out today, showing up today. And good luck with whatever happens next in your data viz journey.